Hello. We are doing a special edition of our weekly Art of Advocacy live show. And there's been a topic in the news, and so I thought it was important that we address that. There's been a lot of reactions around the country, which is exciting to see. And one of the things that I think is really important for us to talk about is that difference between individual advocacy and what you may have heard described as collective advocacy. And I guess I like the term widening our circle of allies. Because as parents, we do so much individual advocacy if we're white, privileged, middle class parents. And parents that do a lot of individual advocacy for their children are usually parents that are connected with others, that know about researching, what their rights are. And all of that is important. And I don't want to take away that individual advocacy because we all need to be doing that with our children. And we also need to be looking at the collective advocacy that we can be doing. Because when we are only advocating for our individual child, that leaves a lot of families out of the conversation. Maybe a lot of families not even going to the IEP team, meeting. And we are leaving so many families more vulnerable. We are leaving so many children more vulnerable and open for discrimination when that individual advocacy is only up to us, is only left to the white middle class people being able to do this. So say hi, welcome in. I would love to welcome you. I'm Charmaine Tanner. I'm a parent of an adult son with Down syndrome who advocated individually for my son throughout his schooling and was able to have him be fully included. And I'm also a retired teacher and now a full-time advocate, and I work with families around the country. Today, we're going to be focusing on a case from Montana. Actually, I've never worked with a family in Montana, so this was good for me to dig a little deeper into Montana's rules and regs. Because there are certain things and state regulations that we know as parents we need to always be aware of. So let me share my screen here, and we will get started. And the big message that I hope that you get today is advocating for one child at a time will not create systemic change for our education system. And that is what we need. We need the system to be almost, I guess, dismantled and have it rise again in one unified system. And that's why it's important for us to make sure that we're supporting each other and we're really looking at that systemic change that we could be making. Because we know individualized advocacy does not lead to equitable schools for everyone. So my mantra for a while has been we need to widen our circle of allies because we are leaving so many families behind when we only concentrate on our advocacy for our own child. And And so as we widen our circle of allies, we need to look at not just other parents that have children with disabilities, but we need to look at how parents with children without disabilities, how they also have an important voice, because we're looking at systemic change for education, not just change for kids that are disabled. We need to look at community members that support us. In this specific case that we're going to talk about today in Montana, the family has had a lot of community support, and that is important. And so I urge you to look at what other people in your community can you call upon and have them engage with this collective advocacy that we need to be doing more of in our own schools and in our own communities. So I think the biggest question that came out when people were looking at this specific case in Montana is, we have this embedded belief that students get special ed services at least until they're 21. Now, we probably know that there are other states like Michigan that students up to age 26 can get special ed services. So we always know that more can be given. The states can give you more rights than what the federal law says. But we also know as advocates, the federal or the state law cannot give you less than what is required on the federal level. And I think this is where that outrage has come with the Montana case. So what we look at is a policy from this Billings school district, but also it comes from the state allowing districts in Montana to decide what that ending age of services is going to be. So Billings has this policy that says schools don't have to enroll students who have reached the age of 19 on or before September 10th of that school year. So now we have a situation where a student is looking at turning 19 this summer, and the school district saying, sorry, but you won't be able to come back to school and receive any more education services. And so this has led to a lot of conversations. And the central question, I think, is the school district in Billings not following what's written in IDEA. And again, this is something central that most parents know. Oh, my kids are, they're entitled to services from age 3 to age 21 at least, right? But guess what? Let's look here at some information. So what we usually base this on comes in, this is a regulation, of course, it's also in the statute, but this regulation 300.101, and in here it specifically talks about a free, appropriate public education must be available to all children residing in the state between the ages of 3 and 21 inclusive. So it's like, there you go. There is the law. There is the regulation that says, so how can Montana get away with only providing services up to age 18? Well, when people started finding out about this, the family started getting lots of advice. They said, oh, you need to file a federal complaint. Yeah, this is not right at all. Some people said, it's a federal mandate, which always trumps a district policy. I mean, that's something that's been ingrained in us, right? Or how about contact the Office of Civil Rights? That's what you need to do. You need to do an OCR complaint. Well, parents, often get lots of advice. And sometimes it's like you really have to verify if that advice is going to be appropriate. Because we base it on section 300.101. However, guess what? There's a section 300.102. And this does not get talked about enough. And as an advocate, I really have not used this section of the regulations. I don't work with a lot of students that are transition age. I work more, it seems like more elementary, middle school parents are still kind of attracted to how can I advocate better. But look at this section 300.102. It says the obligation to make FAPE available to all children with disabilities does not apply with respect to the following: children aged 3, 4, 5, 18, 19, 20, or 21. So there is this exception in the federal law. So when we are telling parents, the state can't, Montana state can't do this, they can't overrule what the federal law is. Well, we have to make sure that we're actually looking at all the aspects of the federal law. So I want to say hey to Anne Marie, and Amy is with us. And Cheryl is here, and she says, unfortunately, they are not legally wrong in a few states. Yeah. And I do have a table, and I can give you the link for it when I send out my newsletter, that has each state and what the ages are. Pretty much 21 is, what is the most prevalent age. But like I said, there are some states that go above age 21, and Maine only goes to 20. Montana, they have the choice in their individual districts. So there are exceptions, and we need to make sure we understand that, because this is another aspect, right, that we may want to look at as far as a collective advocacy action that we can take to help families in states like Montana, Maine, and other places where their child is not automatically going to be getting special ed services up through the age of 21. And Cheryl posted a link in the group. So thanks, Cheryl. Abby is here from Kentucky. So yes, hi, we've got lots of people joining us today. Thanks. So again, what we need to be looking at is, yes, this is a specific case in Montana, but it also increases, I think, our awareness of what are other situations where we could be rallying together and making more sustainable change. So that's the hope, that we can think about that more today, and also take some specific action steps. And I'll give you details about that in a minute or two. So this is the data that I was going to show, but I don't have it pulled up on my computer. So like I said, I'll put this link in the newsletter when it comes out this week, and it shows each state and what the ages are. Oops. So the other thing is, I thought I would share, there was a TV interview that came out yesterday with a family. So let me see if I can stop this and pull up this interview. And it's just a couple minutes long, but I thought it would be helpful. So let's see here. Where am I? Where am I? Let me see if I can bring this up full screen for you. Sorry. Okay. Okie dokie. We'll start back here.
Future. State law allows for students with special needs to receive education up until the age of 21, but school districts don't have to. And now we're learning more about why the district is having such a hard time with making this decision. Meet Emily Pennington. This high school junior is 18 and has a lot in common with many of her classmates.
I really love sports a lot.
But unlike most kids at West High, Emily has Down syndrome and has faced one challenge after another ever since she was born.
She had open heart surgery, and then she had a rare seizure disorder, and then she had leukemia all before she was 3.
Because of those challenges, Emily's parents made the difficult decision to hold her back a year when she was in kindergarten.
At that time, it was just better for her educationally and also her social development.
Fast forward a decade to now, and that decision may come back to haunt the Penningtons. School district policy states schools don't have to enroll students once they've turned 19. Students essentially age out. The Penningtons knew that when they made that decision.
I said, I'm sure there's going to be new legislation within that 12-year span that would allow her to be able to graduate.
Emily turns 19 this July, and her family had hoped House Bill 233 was that new legislation. The law, passed last year, allows school districts to extend high school education to special needs kids up until the age of 21, but not so fast, says District 2 Superintendent Greg Upham.
It's not about Emily. I mean, Emily obviously is at the core of this, but it's about all the students that a decision like this would impact moving forward.
Upham says he's worried about the precedent and whether the state would provide enough funding in the future for others.
This is all making sure that as we look at this and we look to the future, can we support our students as we're required to support them moving forward by adding more students to more years of schooling.
The district is still evaluating the situation, and while they do, the Penningtons aren't just going to sit back.
Just because it's a policy and it's been there for 10 years doesn't mean it's a good policy.
They say they aren't giving up on their miracle baby because they know her future is bright.
I don't want, looking at being like a teacher.
In Billings, Alina Howder, MTN News.
So I think you've probably heard words like that from your superintendent, like we're concerned about the precedent that this might send. And there has been a new bill in Montana, and I will give you links to all of this in my newsletter, but that does provide financial funding for school districts if they decide students above the age, if 19, that they can still get services. And the other thing I think to think about is this not only applies to disabled students, but this policy in Montana applies to any student. So you look at, students that, for whatever reason, may have, repeated a grade, or they may have not received, much education during COVID, and the parents wanted them to receive more education. And if you live in the state of Montana, you have to kind of be at the mercy of your local school district if they're going to allow any student that turns 19 before, September 10th, to allow any of them to continue education. So it's a pretty major issue. And you heard the mom talking about they knew that this was going to be an impact. However, they thought, well, certainly there's going to be a change in the legislation and we won't have to worry about this. So again, as individual parents, we advocate for our children, which we continue to do and we need to do. We also need to get in touch with other community members, families that would be interested in doing policy advocating, where they're advocating for legislation, either state or nationally. And that's not something that every parent wants to get involved in. But that's something I'm sure there's other parents in your district that would be willing to take that up. And so that's why we need to keep widening our circle. We need to keep supporting each other, even when that situation doesn't touch you individually. And Karen, hey, Karen is from Colorado. She said this family even isn't even asking her to give her more than the regular 13 years of education because she started late due to health issues. Yeah, I know. And Cheryl says, I agree completely. And so I will also, in one of the slides, I have the email address for the superintendent that you just heard on that news interview. So I'm going to be encouraging families to reach out to the school district. And yes, you probably don't live in Billings, Montana. And yes, your voice counts. And yes, you can help make a difference when you look outside of what your individual child needs and what we can be doing together. So, yeah, Karen says so much for individualized instruction, right? Yeah, and it's, I think the important thing too is also that this is allowed by the federal law. So it's like, wow, we thought we had all these protections, and sometimes we don't have all those protections we think of. And Stacy, one of our trailblazers, made this comment, and I thought it was so important. She said, if they do consistently follow this policy, it would hurt many students, not just those with disabilities. Do you know how many students need to do a fifth year or more on a regular basis? And Stacy is a high school counselor, so she, not in Montana, but she knows that for some students to have enough credits for graduation and to be able to go on and get their diploma, that they need more than 4 years in high school to get all those credits. And so by having this policy, it's not just cutting out the education services for disabled children, but in essence, it's cutting out a lot of education services for other students. So in my advocate mind, one of the things I was thinking of, it'd be interesting to look at in the Billings School District, how many students have been denied a senior year if they supposedly have aged out of the school district's policy. And it makes me wonder things like, oh, I wonder if it was a football player, if for some reason the district would make an exception for them. So I think it would be interesting to explore that kind of information that you would need to get from the school district. And Anne-Marie says, and what's scary is lots of people are afraid to tackle IDEA again because they're afraid services will regress versus clarify ambiguity. I'm not going to say that word today. And yeah, I hear that from a lot of, national policy advisors, plus also state and local people that, will we be opening this can of worms if we look at reauthorizing IDEA? The last time it was reauthorized was in 2004. And then it took 2 years to come up with the regulations for that new statute or the reauthorization. So yeah, I don't know. The more I'm around, the more I think there's a lot of false hope in IDEA. Because again, Yes, IDEA has information and protections about your rights and what you can do when there's, disagreement. But all of those kind of dispute resolution solutions depend on a family being knowledgeable about their rights, feeling comfortable speaking up about it, having the money to pursue hiring an advocate, having the money to hire an attorney. So yes, IDEA gives us those rights, but it's a right that few of us can afford to enforce. And so, just on that alone, I think it's really important for us to look at what needs to be changed in IDEA. And, I think there's many other sections of the law that we could look at changing. And Cheryl brings up a good point. She said, well, what happens if a student failed a course and needed to retake the course? Yeah, I mean, there's all those things that it makes it just seem really strange that you would not allow a student to come back if they're willing to come back and finish their education. And you're saying, sorry, you are too old. Amy says, can you speak to what type of educational services are provided after social graduation, age 18? Hi, Amy. So that's a great question. And those transition services need to be individualized, just like the rest of your child's services have been throughout their schooling. A lot of school districts will say, this is our transition program. Your child comes back to high school in the morning and takes some elective classes. And then in the afternoon, we go out in the community. We do different things, grocery shopping, going to the laundromat, job shadowing. And so the district already has this transition program box, and that's all they offer parents most of the time. And unless you know to speak up, unless you feel confident in saying, I think my child needs something different for transition, most likely the district is not going to offer you anything different. So an example for us, for Dylan, he wanted to go to college. His brother and sister went to college after high school. And for Dylan, that was the natural progression. You go to college after high school. That does not mean college is for everyone. That is something that Dylan wanted. And so when he was little talking about that, I was like, well, I don't know of any college, Dylan, that's going to have, admit somebody with Down syndrome into their college program. Well, Dylan was insistent, and Dylan has a way of making his goals come true. So we were able to, as white middle class privileged parents, advocate for him to be supported at the local university for Dylan to take classes. So his transition plan was the district provides transportation to his college classes. The district provides a para that will be in Dylan's classes at the beginning of each semester, and mainly to help the professors feel comfortable. So that was his transition plan, and he did that for his 4 years he attended college. So transition looks different. So like everything else, you want to have it developed and looked at as far as what your child's vision and what they want to be able to be doing after high school. And the fund says the IEP team should be making the decisions. If she needs to graduate to pursue her post-secondary goals, they aren't fulfilling their obligations. Yeah. And I mean, that's one of our go-to things, right? This is an IEP decision. But guess what? If you live in a state like Montana, where they do allow for exceptions, that decision is a school district decision, and they take it out of the hands of the IEP team. So LaFonda, thanks for bringing up that point, because I think when we look at how can we support this family in Billings, Montana, what can we do to rally and show our collective advocacy? That's a point that we could bring up, and we could say, yes, we know this is the current legislation. We also know the school district has the choice, has the option. And so what we want to help with is showing the district that the option of allowing students to continue their education is really important. And Anne Marie says, plus in some states, there's an automatic retain at third grade. If a child moved from another state and the enrollment age is different, could also impact the age 19 for high school. Yeah, there's all kinds of, circumstances like that. And the thing about this specific issue is it impacts all high school students in Billings, Montana, not just students with disabilities. And that's why we need to widen our circle of allies. And because there are other families too that are being impacted by this. And Cheryl says the education system is don't ask, don't tell. Yeah. I mean, they don't want parents asking for what options are. They don't. So many districts won't tell parents about options. And sometimes I think it's because the teachers and the staff don't know that there's supposed to be options, right? Some just, teachers have been in the district and it's like, this is what we always do. And they don't understand that, that I and the IEP means even transition services need to be individualized. So Anne says, thank you for pointing out the loophole. Yeah. And as we know, a lot of loopholes and IDEA. Cheryl says families have to be okay with not being treated well when advocating for their kids. Yeah. And again, that's like this cultural thing, because there are a lot of families that I've worked with that, because of their culture, it's disrespectful to question authority figures. And so for those parents, they are the ones that are going to be very quiet at IEP meetings. They are the parents that aren't going to go out and research things, because from their culture, it's like, no, we listen to our elders. We accept what the elders say, the authority figures know. And so those are the families that are getting left behind when we, as white, privileged, middle class families, are the ones that are doing all the speaking. And that's why we need to make it more collective advocacy instead of so much individualized advocacy. And I guess not instead, because to me, we got to do both. I mean, I can't sit here and say as a parent, don't advocate for your child. I mean, please, right? I know, I expect that parents are going to advocate for their child. And now we have to look at another component. And I know it's like, what? This is already enough. But when we gather a few friends in our school or in our district, in our church, in our communities, that workload gets lightened, right? Because we have other people. One of the things that I love that developed in our Trailblazer membership group is parents are putting in when they have an IEP meeting coming up, and other Trailblazers, if they feel it, so-called, are volunteering and virtually attending each other's IEP meetings. And so that support for each other, that can be a way that you also are supporting change in another district, in another state. And Karen says, I spend more time than I should apologizing when I ask for things my child deserves and is entitled to. Yeah. And that, that apology, or I think the other thing that often happens is school districts will feel like, why aren't you happy with what we've already been giving your child? And, it feels like we have to, beg and be so eternally grateful for the crumbs of things that they have given our child. And yeah, and that's where I think having that community behind you to say and to remind us, yes, this is what your child needs. This is what your child deserves. Let's figure out how we can make that happen. And even when we do, the districts treats us as that parent. It's supposed to be a team with parents. Yeah. And yeah, it's, I think about, you know, and even I, have used my That Parent mug. Hello, my name is That Parent. And until I talked to a friend and mentor of mine, Dinah from the state of Washington, I realized that, and she helped me realize that when we identify ourselves as that parent and we're out in front and we're, we wear that advocate, badge with honor, we are still leaving so many parents behind. So I don't want it to be associated that that parent, that assertive parent, that parent that's going to get what their child deserves. It depends on your skin color. It depends on your address. It depends on how much money you have in your bank account. So yeah, there's just so many things, right? Yeah. And Charmaine, you were so right. I am from India, and teachers, educators gain the most respect, so no questions asked ever. Yeah, I mean, look at that. It's and that's something that we need to be supporting our fellow parents with, because when districts know that, oftentimes they take advantage of that parent and they know they're not going to question. And those are probably the shortest IEP meetings and probably the ones that kind of get rubber stamped and doing what we always do, instead of really looking at the unique needs of the child. So Amy says, do you feel parent mentors are informing parents of their rights, or do they follow the district status quo? And it depends. And I think a lot of us give advice based on what we think is the truth, right? And when we don't look at, what's the next regulation and how does that regulation, does that give states more rights than we thought states had? I mean, I thought, the minimum had to be 21 and a state could do more. I was surprised when I read section 101 or whatever it was, 102, and found out that there's that exception and that states can do something else. A lot of districts, and Amy, I don't know if this is what you're looking at. A lot of districts I've heard of, like parent liaisons, some of them called parent mentors. They're a district employee and they're there to help bridge, those parent concerns with, the school district system. And I think there's some mistrust. Sometimes it's like, well, I don't know. They're a district employee. So how far are they going to go out on a limb and really give us information that maybe the district doesn't want them to share? I think it totally depends on the person. As with everything, right? You need to develop a relationship with that parent mentor. And then the other thing is to verify, right? To be able to go and make sure that what they're saying is the actual truth based on law, regulation, or policy, not based on, well, this is what our district always does. And Amy, do you feel, oh, we just did that one. Yeah, Anne says there's so much gaslighting when a family asks for services they're entitled to, or just a simple no without any supporting documentation. And that's where we can help each other to say, I would love to understand the policy that you're referring to. Please give me a copy of that. That is something that is a basic question that parents can ask, but that is like a really crucial one, is to not accept what you're verbally told, but to ask for a copy of the statute, the regulation, the district policy. And in this case, the, Montana state policy you want to be aware of. And that's, always been something that I try to be aware of, because this show, we do get, parents from around the country, and your state regulations, your state laws are what you need to be intimately familiar with. And when I say that, then it's like, yeah, Charmaine, but how many people are like me and want to go read state regulations? Not many. And so that's why you do try to look at things like going to your parent training and information center in your state and seeking out their advice. That's why you want to go to your disability rights protection and advocacy, law firm in your state, and ask for their interpretation, ask for their suggestions. If you have a trusted advocate, ask your advocate to do some research for you. If you have an attorney, your attorney should be doing that research for you. But yeah, we can't accept things at face value. We have learned over time that that's not going to do well, right? Karen, I made a new mom friend and discussed some of the things we're up against. She asked how she could help, and I shared that the best way for her to help is to demand that her children have an opportunity to be educated with students with disabilities and benefit from inclusive practices. Yes, Karen, that's exactly. Thank you so much for doing that, because that's the point that we have to get at, right? This is not, what we're looking for our children is not just a special ed issue. It's an education issue. And when our children aren't included in general ed classes, it's not just our kids that are losing out. It's the other students in the class that are losing out. And we have research to show that when students are included, not only that disabled child is going to achieve more, but their classmates achieve more also. When we have successful inclusion in schools, a lot of times it's because the teachers have changed how they present material. They're giving more choices to children about how they show what they've learned. All of those practices help not only that disabled child with the IEP, but everyone. So this is benefiting all students. And that's where we need to come together with other parents and help them understand that. Desi has a suggestion: volunteer in your community to earn your child's services to reconcile those feelings. So Desi, can you say a little bit more about that? Yeah. And Cheryl's responding to Amy, and she's saying parents often feel those of us that assert our kids' rights are unrealistic and greedy. Yeah. And that's where those conversations need to be happening, because you will get pushback from other families if they feel like, you're taking away something from their child, or the money being spent on special ed could have been spent in a different way. So there's all kinds of things that we need to kind of unearth and open up and have that dialogue about. And Karen says, I do that, paying penance by being a helpful parent. Oh, okay. So, interesting. Yeah. That parent guilt, right? Yeah. We could do a whole show on parent guilt. Yes, that's a great point. More support from the peers' parents. And Desi said, or if a single mom too, right? And Susan, hey Susan, she said being that parent isn't so bad. No, and to me, when I was looking at, kind of, I wanted to like reclaim that. I know as we advocated for our son Dylan, I'm sure I was called lots of names by different school employees. And that's okay, because I knew my son's education was more important than the labels people were putting on me. And then I got to the point where it's like, you know what? Being that parent is showing that you're willing to stand up and speak out. However, we also don't want to leave other families behind if they feel like they don't have the confidence to be that parent, and that we only celebrate that parent and, cheer them on and everything else, where there's quiet parents that don't have the resources to be out in front and speaking up. So yeah, there's a lot, right? Anne says, yes, I learned early during the IEP process, so many sales pitches are made to direct families to what's best for the district, not for the child. Yep. Susan is in Washington, and she says, yes, in our area, 40% of the population has moved from India or China to work in high tech. They tell me culturally they don't argue with authority and are shocked at the idea of fighting for their student. Yeah, so then that's what we need to be looking at, right? And I don't want to, it's not like you need to change and you need to not have that culture anymore, and you need to look at what you can do differently. So yeah, I don't know, Susan. So how do you approach parents that are from that culture that don't question authority, and without, like taking away their culture, but also helping them to make sure that their child gets the education they deserve? So yeah, I'd love ideas on that. I think that would be really helpful. Shaw says, remember, there's always an IEP meeting before the actual IEP meeting. Yeah, and when I work with families as an advocate, we always have our before the IEP meeting too. So the reality is, we can each of us have kind of our own separate meeting ahead of time to get our ideas, strategies, our things in a line. And yes, the school district will do that, but as a parent, you can do that too. And Susan says, so much more to deal with than someone who is used to the US system. Yeah. And that's the thing. I mean, it's like, talk about a foreign system, right? When you move here from another country, it's like, wow. Yeah. So that would be really, really stressful. These are best practices followed by schools that every kid should be receiving, that benefits every child, irrespective of if they have an IEP or 504. Yeah, and that's, to me, that's what we need to do, is go beyond special education with our advocacy, because there's so many marginalized students in our classrooms. And if we only make this a special ed issue, we leave them out too. And that's not what we want to be doing, at least from my point of view. And my point of view, we want to dismantle that extra silo of special ed is over here and general ed is over here, instead to have that unified system where all students are seen as competent, all students are worthy, all students have contributions to make. And this is about every child that walks through the door. It's about every child that rolls through the school door. It's for children that speak different languages. It's for lots of marginalized students in our classroom. And that's, I think, one of the ways that we can widen our circle of allies. And we should like play a drinking game. Every time Charmaine says, widen our circle of allies, we could take a drink of water. But when we look at the impact that we can have on the whole education system, and our kids are one piece of that, but there's so many other kids there that we need to also be speaking up for. So let's see. School districts and superintendents need to communicate these best practices are for everyone, not just to support disabled kids. Yeah, and that's why things like universal design for learning, we need to look at that. That's an education initiative. That's not a special education initiative. And if you've been a listener on our show, you've probably heard me say once or twice that we have to go beyond that special interest group, because when we're only parents of disabled children talking at school board meetings, it's really easy for them to dismiss us. So that's another reason why we have to have more of us actively involved. And Desi says, I volunteered in my child's school and run a choral program that raises funds for nonprofit organizations. Yeah, so I think, again, the school needs to see us as we're not only supporting our children, but we're out there as a band parent or, a volunteer in the school library, that we have to actively show that we are interested in more things than this little piece of special education, right? And so that really helps the school district see she's not just a parent that keeps, asking for more for her child, but she is a parent that is supporting the school in a lot of ways. Susan says, I refer to them as to our ARC parent partners to attend IEP meetings if they want help navigating the U.S. system. Yeah, so I had asked Susan about what do you do when you have parents from foreign countries that don't, believe it's acceptable to question people in authority. And so when I said, you can go to your parent training and information center, also one of the organizations that you want to look for in your community are the ARCs. They often will have advocates that will be willing to attend meetings with families. And so I know when I've worked with families in the past that, had those culture differences, I did more speaking at the meeting than I usually like to do, because I usually want the parents' voice to be heard, right? But yeah, so there's some kind of support systems that we could do and have in place that would be really helpful for other families. Cheryl says, I try to help families develop a vision for their child and then discuss the steps to achieving that vision. Thanks, Cheryl. That's a great idea. To keep focused on what that North Star is for our child, and then to take steps back, if we want to get to that North Star, what do we need to be doing this year? Because each school year, each IEP is going to help your child take one more step closer to that vision that they have. So even when our children are very young in kindergarten, that IEP is important because it's starting to set the tone for this is the vision we have. This is what, when our kids are young, it's more of the parent vision. As our kids get older, it's their vision of what they want. And we need to make sure that their, day at school is providing that support and what they need. Desi says, never underestimate the power of your right to parent observation in classrooms on campus and bring your data to the IEP table. Yeah, and that can be something that, parents quite often will get pushback on observations. And all of a sudden the school district will be worried about privacy, even though they have all kinds of parent volunteers in the building and everything else. All of a sudden, when you want to go to school and observe your child in a class setting, sometimes you'll get pushback. And we do have support and resources in our Trailblazer group where we talk about this is how you can, advocate and what to say back when you get that pushback for observations. And Anne Marie says it's 5 o'clock somewhere. So more water. So thanks for all the conversations. I love it. I love it. I love it. But UDL is being taught at the college level to benefit specifically education, not all kids. Yeah, and the college, teacher prep programs at the college level, I think we've identified for a while that is where, there also needs to be change. So if as a parent, you can pick something that is really close to you, something that is a strong value that you want to make sure, is reflected in your school district, in your state, pick a topic, pick something that you are interested in, and find a couple other parents, a couple other community people that would be willing to work with you on that. And that's really how we're going to make systemic change. And I hate to, put more work on the parent. But the reality is, it's that grassroots level that can make a huge difference. When you have that grassroots level, plus you have support from the superintendent level, the school board level, and you have the parent grassroots, that's when, you have that marriage of change and when systemic change can really happen. And Desi reminds us, yes, persistence is the key. And kind of going back to this specific family in Montana, I have a video from their Facebook page. And so I'm going to share that with you too. So let me see here where we're going. So I need to share this. So if I haven't said it enough, our individualized advocacy is not going to result in equitable schools. So we have to widen our circle of allies. And here are some contact information for the superintendent, his phone number, his email. I'll also post these in the comments. The executive director for special education, Randy Russell. You can make a phone call to Randy. You can also email the board. I believe April 18th is the next school board meeting for Billings School District. And I think the family is really hoping that this item will be on the school board agenda. So far, I think they've chosen not to put it on the agenda. So, yeah. So my hope is that there's something that you can do today to reach out and support this family and make that difference. So let's look here. This is Jana Pennington, the mom of Emily Pennington that live in Billings. And let me pull up her video that she did. I think it was last night on her Facebook page. So let me find it. And shoot, I need to. Are you seeing this? Let me, sorry, get back. Start at the beginning. I wanted this to be full screen, but oh, you know what it is? It's this one. Okay.
Really quickly, and I just wanted to get on here really quickly and just I just wanted you guys to know how much I appreciate the time that you've spent. Time is, I know, my most valuable asset, but the time that you've taken to let Emily's story be heard, I so appreciate it, and I know Emily appreciates it, and so I want to say thank you so much. I wish that I could answer all of your comments. I said, okay, I am answering every comment that I have gotten, and I have been overwhelmed with the love and support and all the wonderful comments. So I just thought maybe I could do this video and publicly thank all of you for the love and support. And not only is this about Emily, but it's about all the kids in this district, all the kids. We can be a voice for all of those kids. So my heart goes out to you in appreciation for your love and support and caring and thoughtfulness and sacrifice of your time to get this story out there, to get some attention so that we can see some things happen. So thank you so much to all of you in this wonderful community and now actually throughout the nation. So I'm so thankful and feel so blessed. Anyway, you will be hearing more from us. This isn't over yet, so we have some things that we're wanting to do. I think you've heard about the board meeting coming up in April. I'm not quite sure what we're doing. It's just happened so quickly. I had really no idea. I know people would care. A lot of you know Emily personally. I knew a lot of you would care, but I had no idea what would happen. So again, thank you. I love you and I appreciate you. And I am not a cute crier, so I am getting off right now. But again, thank you so much, Billings. I appreciate you and everyone else out there in the country who's supporting her.
So take a minute today. I'll post the emails and phone numbers of people in the Billings School District that have the power to change the decision that they've made for Emily Pennington, but also the decision they're making is impacting many students in the district. So thank you for being here and giving your time and sharing ideas. And it's it's a collective energy when we meet here. And I hope you'll be back on Thursday. Dr. Julie Costin, Dr. Christy Preddy-Flancek. They are both returning to talk about more of how to make any lesson inclusive. And so we will be doing that Thursday on our regularly scheduled show here at noon Mountain Time. I wanted to come live today because I thought that this issue was important. And I hope that you will do some small thing today to make a difference to, not only this family in Billings, Montana, but that this will be a first step that you can take in organizing collective advocacy in your own community. So I am Charmaine Tanner. I appreciate you being here. Thank you so much. And hopefully I will see you on Thursday.